All right. Hey, everybody. If you are tuning into this video, this is Six Tensions of a Healthy Church, Session 1. My name is Emma, and I'm the Communications Director here at Res. And sitting across from me is Pastor Daniel.
And I'm the one of the lead pastors here at Res Church, and so excited to get started reshooting this whole course. I mean, it's been in desperate need for it to be reshot for a while.
Yeah. So if you're taking this course, it probably means that you are interested in what it means to be an owner at Res, what it looks like to be fully bought in, fully plugged in to Res Church. So that begs the question, what is ownership? Why would you even want to become an owner?
So that's a good question. By the time this video's out, we may have changed the name of ownership to just covenantal member, trying to explain what that really is. And so this was in a reaction maybe 10 plus years ago. We came up with this process because we felt like American church membership is this really low bar. You have like one interview and okay, you're a member, but we never really taught what that is or what that means. And there's not a lot of education or shared expectation around that. And so we thought, man, that's not enough. So yeah, you're probably a member of Res if you come and you're engaged, and we would probably call you that in our church software or what have you. Hey, that's a member. This is home. The actual way that you did church in the New Testament was pretty radical. I mean, it's pretty crazy how radically they were changing their life. They were submitting to one another, their radical generosity toward one another, their submission not only to one another, but to the office of elder and deacon and the offices of the church. And so to such an extent that the gap between the New Testament and American church membership is so wide, so broad, that we felt like, man, there really is a shared expectation that we should teach to, and we should all agree upon, that is like what it looks like. And so we call it ownership, and it just means like you have opted in to this level of submission, this level of accountability, this level of encouragement, that you're committing to do these things. But we don't think you can opt in without some education. So we teach to the test. We have this whole course to just try to open the Bible, look at New Testament church and go, they're doing these things. This is just the way it works. So that by the end, before you get to the church covenant, you would understand why that stuff would even be on the paper, why it would be a thing we care about. No pressure at all. Like if you go through this course and you don't want to sign the church covenant, great. We think you need to have some shared conviction that this is how church is supposed to be done, and want to do that and have that done in the context of the church family. And if you don't, one, we don't want you to sign a church covenant. Secondly, we should have some real conversations about whether or not you believe church should be done that way. Because I think God calls you to a church. Maybe God has not called you to Res. Maybe he's actually calling you somewhere else, and we need to help you figure out where that is. And you believe church should be done differently, and so we should talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's ownership.
In a nutshell. Nice. Well, for our first session, we have the concept of diverse yet unified. And I think it's important to go into this first talking about like what does that mean and why is that important?
So diversity, what a word that has been co-opted in the last, 25 to 40 years of our culture. Starting all the way back in like the early 1900s, we started to see legislation to try to like legislate diversity.
Yeah.
Like somehow we're gonna force it in some fashion. Which is odd, right? I mean, I think we all have different opinions about like laws around diversity and whether or not those even are effective. But the reason we're talking about that is because it's so prevalent in the Bible. I mean, you just from New Testament church to New Testament church, what you see is a multicultural church over and over again. And we have a goal here. At Res, we want to be a multicultural, cross-generational church that fights for unity. That means different cultures. We represent at least 5 distinct generations in our church right now, and we're supposed to get along so well that no one can figure out why.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that we're actually doing that, but man, we're trying to do that because it's a testimony to Christ. And so we're going to study that. We're going to go through the text today. We're going to look at that. We want our group, if you're going through this course, to look at that and read the text like we are in the Bible and see how that happens and pull some cool stuff up. So we have 3 distinct learning objectives for this course today. We believe, and we want to hopefully prove through the scripture here today, that diversity is a reflection of heaven, the early church, and it's a testimony to the power of the cross. It is only the blood of Jesus that does this. Secondly, unity is a non-negotiable inside the church body, and it will come at a cost. And then thirdly, all humans default toward comfortable environments, traditions, and routines. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the last one's funny because, I mean, you say that and it's so obvious, but I think that we kind of forget that all the time.
Right.
Like, my preference is always going to be towards what is comfortable. And the tension here being is that diversity is uncomfortable. And so it's going to force us to get out of our comfort zone, which is why it's something that is a testimony to the power and the work of the Holy Spirit, because without that, we wouldn't be able to do this. So these are all really fun points to discuss. Unity being non-negotiable is interesting because we see so much disunity in the world around us, and even in churches where people split over things. And the idea of like unity is something that must be fought for. Yeah. Like almost above so many other things that we think, oh, well, this is really important. But is it worth not being unified over?
Yeah. And I'll say, and this is something we live by here at Res, that there are going to be things we would break over.
Yeah.
And they are closed-handed doctrines. They are very significant theological, doctrinal things. Outside of that, our job is to fight for unity. You see a lot of disunity in the New Testament churches. The difference is it's always getting addressed. It's always getting addressed. They're not running away from that. So one thing that we named this course 6 Tensions of a Healthy Church. And I would just want to spend just a moment talking about tension, because a tension is something you have to manage. And there's you can when you hear that word, you think of like something under that pressure.
Right.
If you've ever pulled a rubber band or even like strapped down the load in the back of a truck, right? There's just tension. And the difference between a tension and a problem is that a problem is something you solve. It's like a puzzle you put together. But a tension is something that doesn't ever go away. And so it's being managed.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us like problems because we want to fix them and have them go away.
Yeah. I mean, managing infers this idea that it's going to continue to be something that we have to deal with, right? It doesn't go away. It's just kind of there.
So a problem can be solved, but a tension must be managed. And all of our courses are going to be tensions. So all these sessions, we're going to talk about a tension. The idea that you're diverse, but you're unified is a tension.
Yeah.
I mean, that is. Everything about that it was in the New Testament in the first century, and it is now in our churches and our culture. So in terms of this idea of covenantal membership or owner, we have said for quite a while, we've said members have rights, but owners have responsibilities. And so we do believe that to be part of a New Testament church, it's not a bunch of privileges that you get. And when you use that word member, people think of like country clubs or Costco.
Yeah.
Right? Like you flash your ID.
You're 50% off or whatever.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Now I can get in the door and get my discounts. But that's none of that is really what you see in the New Testament. What you see is that when people have quote unquote opted into the church, when they've become part of the church, all of a sudden, man, they're serving and using these gifts and being generous with one another. And like there's an empathy where when someone else is crying, you're crying, right? When they're in pain, you're in pain. When they're rejoicing, you're rejoicing. And so really we see a lot more about responsibility.
Yeah.
An American church is so weird. Yeah. Where like it's kind of this consumeristic thing where we kind of come for the entertainment of the service and then we leave.
Yeah. To feel good about ourselves and then go home or, maybe a little personal growth in there. But I mean, it goes back to this idea of like managing tensions, like as an owner or covenantal member, the idea is that you're responsible for managing that tension as well.
That's true. No, I think that's actually very true. And we want to establish a culture that matches what we see in this New Testament, right? This sort of this gospel culture, and culture. If you're not, I mean, again, another term that gets just thrown around a lot. An organizational culture is a collection of values, expectations, and practices that guide and inform the actions of all the members. And so, we want a gospel culture. We want a culture that lifts up the gospel, lives it out, declares it with our actions and our words, and matches a lot of the beautiful things we see in the Bible. That's going to take work.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of tensions to manage to make that happen, right? But I think it matters a lot. We have a quote, I think, from Ray Ortlund Jr. in here. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. It says, gospel doctrine creates gospel culture and has the same authority as gospel doctrine. What exploded across the Mediterranean world in the first century was not brilliant ideas only. What exploded and captivated the Roman Empire was a new kind of community, a new experience of community.
Yeah, so I think one thing you're going to see us attempt to establish both in this session and over all 6 sessions is right doctrine matters. It totally does. You know, we would call that to be orthodox or orthodoxy. You know, our doctrinal statements, you go to our website, you read our doctrinal statements, you go to the Baptist Faith and Message, you look at these close-handed beliefs. They matter. They're very important. Without right doctrine, everything else is going to go wrong anyways. But in and of itself, right doctrine's not enough.
Right.
What has to then happen is the living out of that doctrinal statement, how it feels when someone walks in the building matters as much as. And so we might call that, instead of orthodoxy, we might call that orthopraxy, the practical living out of the doctrine. And so it is critical for us to not only have and teach right doctrine and protect it, but establish a set of traditions and ideas and practices that live out those things. That's the organizational culture. So we're all about gospel culture. You'll find it in our value statements and our goals. We talk about it. You'll find it in the way we celebrate things. You know, we celebrate things that lead to gospel culture, and we have to root out things that don't.
Right.
It's of preeminent importance to us.
Yeah. So while you're in your group, take a second and you're going to write down some things that you feel like describe our church, things that might be unique to the way you see it, or maybe it's something we've talked about or an idea or something you've seen when you've been here on a Sunday, and then share that with your group. All right, so let's get back to kind of what the purpose of this class is. We've kind of touched on it. We've gone over it a couple times, but seeing this is first session, it's kind of important. So why should you be taking this class? What should you be getting out of it?
Yeah, so of course we want to get to the end of this class and have some agreement of what you're agreeing to. You're like, yes, I see what you see from the Bible about how to live this out, but also like this is our chance to steer or shape our church culture, and we want to be intentional by teaching the things that we are going to prioritize in a biblical manner. And so we're going to open the Bible and we're going to try to re-emphasize for you what matters. And so in this class, in this course, as you do this in a small group, you know, this class will include, I guess you could call this lectures or conversation, discussion in your group, and then reflection. So there's some time where in between your sessions, you should be looking back at these verses and these questions and thinking through your observations and experience in our church to like kind of process through what we're teaching here and what the Bible is saying. I think that's important, right? Don't just fill out the blanks and be like, okay, well, I'm done now.
Yeah. It's not the same as like a college class where we're trying to say like, oh, this is what you should think, fill in blank. Now you know right answer. It's this idea of like, this is supposed to be transformative as well.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Learning what it means to be a part of a church. Hopefully, like we were saying, understanding that through the lens of what they were doing in the New Testament church and how that translates to us currently right now in our day and age.
And we want to be, as a church, we think it is most biblically accurate to be cross-generational church that raises up the next generation And we want to be intentionally multicultural. Now, when I say intentionally multicultural, oh man, right?
Red flags.
That phrase is pregnant with all of this meaning from our
Mhm.
culture. What I mean is we want to reflect the community around our church.
Yeah.
Demographically, we should look like the community around our church.
Yeah.
And if we don't look like the community around our church, then I think that is problematic.
Yeah.
If we look different, and plenty of those experiences, maybe you've had them, maybe you've had them. I have certainly had them. I will give you some fun stories about going into churches that did not look like the neighborhood. And you're wondering, like, how and why did that happen?
Yeah.
We want to look like our neighborhood. I think it makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. First place we're going to turn in scripture is Acts 6, 1-4. So let's just go there right now. It says this: Now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. And the 12, this is the 12 apostles, summoned the full number of disciples and said, "It is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty, but we will devote ourselves to prayer and the ministry of the word." Okay, so what is happening in the early church? Churches just formed. We're right after the day of Pentecost. People have come to Christ, and we just super early. I mean, in the first few months of the church forming, and they're distributing food to widows particularly, and there's a complaint about ethnic bias, that the Greek Jews basically are being neglected, and the Hebrew Jews are actually getting more food. And so there's an ethnic bias. We call that racism nowadays, right? There's another word that's pregnant with meaning, but ethnic bias, the complaint comes up to the elders of the church. There's a whole nother lesson about how they don't go and deal with it directly, but they raise up a group of leaders. The key here is they do not ignore it.
Yeah.
They take action to address it. And what you see is this, and I just want you to catch this, okay? Because I think this gets missed sometimes. We're talking about year one of God's church. Okay?
Yeah.
Year one of God's church. Ethnic bias was a problem in the early church, and the church did not tolerate it.
Yeah.
I was this many years old. I mean, like, I had never heard that lesson in that way in being taught Acts growing up in the church or in any Bible lesson. It was always taught in a different way, never as the parallels to things that I might struggle with today. And I remember reading that and being blown away, just going through the Bible and going, maybe some of these problems aren't new.
Right.
And maybe some of these problems have not gone away either. Maybe this is a tension to manage, not a problem that ever got solved.
Right.
So I guess we have a discussion question. We want them to pause and think about this.
Yeah,
right?
and this discussion question is ethnic bias still a problem or tension that we have to manage in the church today? So go ahead and discuss that in your group, and then hit play when you're ready to start again. All right, so one of our big areas that we often have a lot of what we would call preferences around is worship. And this is something that often comes up in church. It's maybe one of the first things that you looked at when you came to Res is, what is the worship like? Do I like the sound of the music? Do I feel something when I'm singing? What is it about the worship? And oftentimes this is also where we hear the most complaints. Oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I want more hymns, or I want more modern worship. So how does this idea of like worship go into this concept of diverse but unified?
Well, so I think a good, I think it's harder to see certain types of bias, certain types of like our own comfort, our own blind spots. I think that's harder. Worship's probably one of the easiest ways we could find it.
Yeah.
And maybe it feels a little less weighty. And so maybe it's easier to talk about. I will say that, like, if, you guys had that conversation a moment ago in your group about ethnic bias. Is it still a problem? Hopefully you have a chance. You just finished reading Galatians 2:11-14, because what happens in there, and it's referenced in Acts 10, is that it's like years later, and racism has crept back in. Ethnic bias has crept back into that original church. And the Apostle Paul has to go rebuke the Apostle Peter because it has crept back in again. And so I don't think we should be blind to the fact that if this was happening multiple times in the New Testament, that we might have the potential that it happens here today.
Yeah.
We asked the question, does it exist today in the church? And there are smattering of answers, I'm sure, right? A smorgasbord, a spectrum of answers. I will say 20-something years ago when my wife and I were first looking for a church out of college, my wife's Hispanic. We went to a church, visited a church over East Bakersfield. I mean, like in the 70+% Hispanic neighborhood. And we're in there, about 200 plus people in the worship service, and we're just like singing the songs. And my wife turns to me and says, "Did you realize I'm the only non-white person standing in this room?" And I did not. So first of all, I didn't realize that. Right. Now that says something about when it's comfortable for you, how easily you'll miss that it's not comfortable for someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one.
Yep.
Because I did not until she said something. Then I looked around and my next thought was, how?
Yeah.
You're in East Baker. You're on Mount Vernon, right? Like I could throw a rock and hit a Hispanic person. How did you keep them all out of here? Right? Did you run them off with pitchforks? Did you put up a fence? Something culturally in there did not feel right, I guess, did not feel comfortable enough. And so I will say, like, I'm sure that little bits of bias, it's on a spectrum, right? It's not black and white, exist all over the place when it comes to culture, ethnicity, or this or that or whatever. But it wasn't that long ago in Bakersfield that I'm at a church where I'm like, how did you manage an all-white 300-person church in East Bakersfield?
Right.
We could get into the whys, but I would say we have a responsibility, if we're the majority, to figure out why a minority is feeling uncomfortable.
Right.
I want to be curious about that.
Yeah.
And so I would say that. Now, we want to talk about worship because I think that in worship diversity, we get the simplest conversation.
Yeah. It's less loaded with emotion because you start talking about ethnic bias, you start talking about, why aren't these cultures included? Why is this? And, there's a lot of hurt there where worship is, maybe there's some hurt there too.
But you're not going to find the worship debate on CNN.
No, exactly. Like you're not going to get there and be like, oh, what? This church is singing hymns only, and it's like this big headline news.
Salon or Mother Jones has not had a blog about your worship service, right?
Yes,
so it's just less politically charged to talk about worship, and it's still a first century issue.
Yeah,
because you turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 14, and what you're going to read is a debate and now controversy again in the early church. Guys, we're in the we're at the very beginning of the church.
Yeah.
And we already have worship wars going on in the church. So it's not new. It's always been this way. And so 1 Corinthians 14, I want you guys to read that in your group and look at this and look at what he's talking about, that there's some disorder and some disunity in worship, and they're trying to get to, hey, we need to organize this. It's a little too wild. We need to get it a little more measured. And so here's the funny part. Some people would read that and go, look, God is a God of organization and order. Look at 1 Corinthians 14. He everything needs to be, a service order. It needs to be perfect. There shouldn't be ad-libbed. It shouldn't be live or whatever, until you turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6 and you read David praising God, coming back with the Ark of the Covenant, coming into the city. And if you read that, what you'll realize is he's dancing and he's essentially naked. I mean, he's pretty dang close to naked, not a type of worship that we would say is good for a Sunday morning here at Res. But he's dancing and he's so exuberant toward the Lord. And he's doing all these things. Well, what happens is his wife looks at him with disdain because she doesn't like the passion of his worship. Now, this parallels how often have either of these extremes happened in churches. Disorder, just like no real order to worship, and it gets a little too wild, and it's no longer glorifying to God, and it's not leading people anywhere in worship, or the opposite. People look down their nose at someone that maybe is a little too passionate, and they are like, they're just performing.
Yeah.
It's not real, right? We think the worst of somebody. I think you can look in the Bible and you see the same extremes that we would often see in the church. And I like, it's not new.
Yep.
It's a tension that must be managed. And I think the solution to that is in 1 Corinthians 12. You've read 1 Corinthians 12. What does 1 Corinthians 12 say?
It's all about how we are one body in Christ, right? So it's that while you have a gift and I have a gift, and whoever you are out there, you have gifts that God has given you. And those are all amazing. And maybe we have different styles of worship or different ways that we express love towards God and adoration towards him and the work he's done in our life. But the emphasis here is that it's one God, one Spirit, one Lord, one church. This idea that there isn't a difference or a value judgment that's happening between you and me just because we don't sing the same kind of songs, or I raise my hands in worship and you don't. Now there's like, I'm holier than you are. And that just doesn't exist in the church.
Let's pause the video right now and give you and your group a chance to read through those 3 passages that we're explaining here: 1 Corinthians 14, 2 Samuel 6, and 1 Corinthians 12. And when we come back, we'll make a couple points and move on.
All right, well, welcome back. And let's talk about this idea that unity is non-negotiable.
Absolutely. So you're coming off of reading these passages, and I'll make this point as we move into unity is this. When we talk about the body of Christ having different parts, it's not just spiritual gifts. It is that. There's also a variety of cultures. We see that in the New Testament. It's also a variety of ages. We see that in the New Testament and the Bible as a whole. It's also in personalities. Not everybody has the same personality.
Yeah.
We would hate it if everyone did have the same personality, right? If everyone was an introvert, no one would talk. We'd all sit around waiting for the extrovert to show up and let it, pull us into the conversations.
Yeah.
If everyone was extroverts, no one would listen. We'd all be frustrated. So there's a diversity even of personality, of passion, of these types of things. And that is the beautiful part of the body, that everything's different. But also, if it's not unified, that's the disastrous part.
Yeah.
And so we want to look at some scriptures here that talk about unity in the body. So we've talked about the diversity of the body. Now let's talk about the unity of the body. And we'll start in Ephesians 4, 2-5, if you want to read that.
Yeah, it says right here, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism.
So just a couple words that from the text that I want to call out. We enter into the conflict, the tension of unity with gentleness, patience, humility, bearing with one another. I mean, just if you just sat and thought about those 4 things, right? That's if you walked into unity, or if you walked into a conflict with those 4 things on your mind, conflict would go differently.
Yeah.
We rarely do. We walk in like, I want to be right. I want to get my way.
Yep.
That's not what that says. I love this as eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit. Okay, so 1, we should want it. 2, it's not just unity of an organization.
Yeah.
It is unity of the Spirit. It is reflecting Jesus, a reflection of Christ, a reflection of the Spirit. And then he gets into 1, not 2, not 5, not 10. And then we followed that up in your booklet with Revelation 7:9. After this, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. Okay, so the Apostle John is on the island of Patmos. He has this revelation about what it's going to look like at the end when we're all in heaven. So everyone that's been saved by Jesus is praising God, and he says, listen, it's every nation.
Yeah.
It's all of these tongues, all these languages. Okay, you think there's diversity in the way we do church here in America.
Yeah.
in Bakersfield. But they're all nations, all languages, all tongues, all time,
Yeah.
all eras together. So man, if you can't stay unified, if you can't get along
Yeah.
with a believer here in your church or down the block at the next church now, you're going to have a rough time in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can spend eternity with Christians of all tongues, all tribes, all nations, all churches, all denominations that declare Christ as king are going to be there, whether you agreed with them about the little non-essential doctrines or not.
Yeah.
So we should practice getting really good
Yeah.
at unity. And we should also practice and want to reflect heaven in being diverse. Like just, hey, if that's the way heaven's going to look, I don't see why we would want to be in our little holy huddle and all be the same and homogenous now.
Right.
Let's be a reflection of what heaven's going to be like. I think that is as biblical as it gets. And if you don't see that, I would say, hey, we're actually unintentionally straying from the Bible. We shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
We should hold to that. Thoughts on those verses? I mean, you've heard those before.
Yeah, I've definitely heard these before. And I think one of the beautiful things about this picture of heaven is this idea like that the diversity of like languages and people throughout history is like that is not erased from you.
Right.
Like it's important to who you are. Like who you are as a person contributes to the body of Christ.
It does.
And so it's not just about like we talk about it, it's diversity and unity. It's unifying this idea that like, because we're different, that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it work. I mean, it's the illustration where you have the body of Christ. It's the different pieces of the body that have to work together to create a whole person.
Absolutely.
But they have to work together to create the whole person. So it's both and I just love the idea of there not being like an erasure of culture or a language or things like that in heaven. Because so often, I mean, I fall into this sometimes too, where I start thinking like, oh, in heaven, it will be like this. And you think of people in heaven being like you know, like speaking English, you know, coming from this background, this time and whatever. And then thinking about being in heaven and standing next to somebody who was saved in, 1800 in India or something.
Right.
It's like, there won't be a disunity there because it's Christ that brings us all together.
Well, and let me, if you're listening right now and maybe, okay, in fact, let me address this. Maybe even though we're reading from the Bible, you're still a little skeptical, right? Like, because again, we have been washed by our culture and the politicking of this whole thing and this topic. But let me just ask you like a thought exercise. If you go to one church and everybody looks the same, votes the same, smells the same, talks the same, dresses the same, and they're unified. I mean, that's cool that they're unified. But if you go to a church and man, they are wildly different in every way, generationally, culturally, even some language differences, how they would dress, how passionate their worship. I mean, everything is different. But they're super unified. That you would pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so would someone that was not Christian, because all of us would go, why are you unified?
Yeah.
Why are you hanging? Like, what?
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Why would you do that? Yeah.
How can you so easily gloss over these differences that separate us in the secular world? Well, the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
Right? The unity of Jesus, what Jesus has done for us is so overwhelming that we couldn't even imagine separating over all these non-essential issues.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you from personal experience, talking to people, that is shocking to the outside world.
Yeah, because we live in a culture where if I'm not like you, there's no reason for us to spend time together.
Right.
Like if we don't agree on something, there's a degree of separation that I even have to keep from you just to say I don't associate with that. Like I'm not like that, so I don't talk to you because I don't want people to think that I'm like that.
Right.
And we don't find that in the church. Like we find people who are different and like you said, these non-essential things that would normally tear us apart. And working together is more of a testimony to the power of the gospel and the good news of Jesus and what he does for us, reconciling us not only to God, but to each other, than if like you all look the same, you talk the same, you think the same. Yeah, of course you're unified. That's just anyone would do that.
We jokingly like to refer to our church as the island of misfit toys.
Yeah.
just because it's so different and nothing really matches. It's not like a set of things that all match. It's actually like the castaways and everything. I mean, not that we devalue who's in our church, but just that it's so different. There's no real way to describe it, which is a problem they had in the early church. They could not figure out a name. They kept calling Christianity the way, but they didn't know what to call the followers of the way. So it wasn't until in persecution and in some almost in satire that they called them Christians.
Yeah.
And then the Christians are like, yes,
let's own this.
That's what we are. So yeah, we want to be Christian. Diversity, I will say just from, so I went to school for business, for government and business, and studied lots of entrepreneurial stuff and marketing, all this fun stuff. And so one thing that fascinates me is to look at organizational behavior. I've always enjoyed that. We have a lot of data now on how people work and stuff. And so one of the things that they've found in the secular world, in just organizations, is that if you have a team, if you put a team together to solve a problem, manage a product, anything, that if you put a diverse group of people together, they will outperform a homogenous team pretty substantially, like over 20%. And the reason is you don't get as much groupthink.
Yeah.
You get a lot more pushing and pulling and pressing on issues to improve them. But when you get everyone's kind of the same background, same style, same worldview, same everything, you tend to just immediately fall into a groupthink. And so there's actually some beauty even outside of a church that shows how fun diversity can be and how productive it can be, which I would just say is this: the truths of the Bible are true even outside the church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you would pay attention to those things and then someone were to introduce you to these concepts in the Bible, you'd go, oh, wow, I've seen that in a small, distorted version, what the beauty of the diversity of Christ is in the church. We did say there are things you break over.
Yeah.
And so open-handed issues versus closed-handed issues, open-handed doctrinal issues or practical issues in the church, we would call those non-essential.
Yeah.
That meaning we kind of theological issues, we would tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 1 issues are absolutely like core issues of salvation.
Yep.
So salvific issues, or issues about the nature and character of God. And typically all tier 1 issues are one of those two things, around the nature or character of God, or about how you are saved.
Yeah.
Those are tier 1. Now there are some tier 2 issues we would break over, but they're non-salvific issues, or they're not about the character or nature of God. And that's generally how denominations are formed.
Yeah.
Is over tier 2 issues, rarely over tier 1. And there are a few. I mean, if you're, again, at the end of this course, you'll read through our Baptist Faith and Message and all of our closed-handed beliefs. You can understand what those things are. And then like you get into tier 3 stuff, and like, trust me when I say they are not that important. Right. And we want there to be a diversity of opinions about some of those things inside of our church where people don't even see it the same way. And we think that's healthy and okay. What you don't want is like, the famous church splits that have happened over the years of like the most non-essential things ever. I couldn't even call them tier 3. They're like tier way down the list.
Yeah.
It's like hat peg church and non-hat peg church. You're just going like, we split a church over hat pegs.
Yep.
Carpet colors and wall paint.
Put it one on one side.
And they can face each other. And
exactly.
Have that's so Christ honoring, right?
Yeah. It definitely shows the gospel to the world around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what I love about this idea of the need for diversity for almost like strength, and the idea of these non-essential issues being something that you can disagree about, and it not being something that like breaks a church apart is, you think about like a bone, and a bone has this lattice inside of it that keeps it strong. And if it only ever gets pressure from one way, it only ever builds to strengthen the bone in one direction. But if it gets pressure in multiple different ways, it builds to strengthen the bone in multiple different directions.
That's good.
And so I think that if we're only ever trying to focus on one thing, one problem, or we're all unified against this one thing, but we don't have the diversity of opinions of different kinds of people who are going to see things differently, we will end up breaking. And it's less because of, because we had this wrong. And it's just because we couldn't see these other problems, because we were blind to them, because they're not our problems, because I'm not that way or this way.
Right. I will add, we've mostly talked about diversity of gifts, diversity of worship, diversity of style, diversity of culture. There is a new kind of diversity, and it's the diversity generationally. So we have about 5 generations here in our church. Now, some of that comes because lifespans are increasing.
Yep.
So as a lifespan continues to increase, you have more and more generations under the same roof. And historically, one, you haven't had as many generations, number one. Number two, you've just had a lot of churches that like the younger generation doesn't feel welcome. They just go start their own church. And so I don't think any of those are Christ honoring things. I think we're trying to manage the tension of that diversity as well. There's a wonderful book, if you're interested in reading it, called A New Kind of Diversity that I found to be fascinating. It's a ton of data around generations and how each of them has been brought up in different economic and cultural climates, so they view the world differently. So they have an innate different worldview just because of what they were born into.
Right.
But not their fault, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's very blunt. It talks about the good parts of that and the negative parts of that at each generation. But man, we're working really hard at figuring out what it looks like to be cross-generational. And my own philosophy is that those of us that are older generations have a responsibility to bear with the failings of the young and to lift them up, to give them space to fail, to give them authority to run things and to get out of the way before we die. Like I don't want to be a lead pastor until I die.
Yeah.
I want to be a lead pastor for 10 to 15 years and raise up leaders and then step aside so they can grow and I can maybe support. But I think that's as important as some of these other types of diversities. And we're working hard on it. I would just say for us, diversity across all of these various areas, it matters. Like we think it matters.
Yeah.
We think it's important. We think it's a tension to be managed, to fight for unity, but it still matters. There's a quote.
It's from Chuck Lawless, and it says, "A strong church learns from the past while preparing for the future. A church with only a young generation sometimes pushes unwisely in wrong directions. But a church with only older folks, on the other hand, will ultimately die. Strong churches connect both generations."
And that quote from Lawless is back talking really about 2 generations.
Yeah.
Think of this. The scenario we're in now is 5 plus. Maybe in the next few years, maybe 6. So more complexity by far than we've ever had. Anyways, these are our main things. We would love for you guys to have more discussion around this, the scriptures that you had an opportunity to read, the discussion question, and kind of your thoughts on this. You want to kind of summarize for us the session?
So in summary, this session, we've talked about how diversity is a reflection of heaven, the early church, and a testimony to the power of the cross. Unity is non-negotiable inside the church body, but it will come at a cost. And all humans default towards comfortable environments, traditions, and routines.
That's real.
Yep.
We've included some reflection work for you over the week. You can read some other passages and think about a few other things. Got some excerpts from different books and everything, just to kind of maybe flesh this issue out a little bit better for you. We hope this was edifying and encouraging for you. We hope there was some learning. We hope that we represented the Bible well for you, so you understand where these convictions in our elders come from. And I wish I could be in every discussion of every group that got to watch this video and just sit in there and watch you get to process and understand like how the Bible informs our model for the church rather than us going, well, we want this and we'll have to find it in the Bible somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for session 1, and we can't wait to see you in session 2.
Awesome.